She stood in the rain outside the mansion she once called home, her diamonds gone, her pride dissolving, when a stranger's quiet question pierced through the storm. If everything you had was gone, who would you be? Hi, my beautiful family. I have missed you all. Thank you so for sticking around with me. I truly appreciate your love and support. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The rain came suddenly, pounding against the marble driveway like the sound of applause, mocking her. Alina Pierce stood at the edge of what used to be her world, the gleaming white mansion with its 12 pillars, the same house where she once hosted charity galas and anniversary dinners that made headlines. Now she stood there with nothing but a suitcase scuffed at the edges, a bank account frozen, and a heart heavy with something worse than grief, humiliation. She didn't cry. Not yet. Her ex-husband, Gregory Pierce, had been precise even in cruelty. The divorce papers were delivered with an itemized list of what she was not entitled to. No settlement, no penthouse, not even the car she drove. Just one word in his final note: earn. She had spent the last 3 years earning his love, earning his approval, earning her place beside him at parties where people smiled too wide. And now, as the iron gates closed behind her, she realized she had nothing left to earn. The rain clung to her lashes, streaking through the mascara she hadn't been able to afford to replace. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Transfer complete. Please vacate by 5 p.m. It was 4:57. Alina swallowed hard, glancing once more at the window on the top floor where she had once stood beside Gregory, toasting their future. She wondered if he was up there now, already moving on with someone younger, softer, more manageable. Someone who wouldn't ask him why the world outside his glass walls felt so empty. She stepped forward. The guards didn't meet her eyes as they opened the gate. The world outside the mansion smelled different, like wet asphalt, exhaust, and freedom that felt more like exile. 3 blocks away, under the same relentless rain, Ethan Cole adjusted the hood of his coat and continued wiping down the park bench in front of him. He could have gone home, his team would have handled this, but Ethan believed in showing up. Every Thursday, he volunteered at Haven Street Outreach, a small initiative that provided food, blankets, and quiet dignity to those society had learned to overlook. He didn't tell anyone who he really was. The name Ethan Cole was known in the business world as a discreet investor with a network of companies that rebuilt failing communities, but the man in the rain tonight didn't look like a millionaire. His hands were calloused from building things himself: benches, tables, trust. He preferred anonymity. It kept people honest. He watched the city's rhythm, the people rushing by, umbrellas like small shields, faces drawn tight with preoccupation. He had learned something after losing his sister years ago: people only look up when they're lost. And tonight, as he spotted a woman dragging a suitcase through the rain, he saw that look: lost, not in direction, but in purpose. She walked as if each step was an apology. Alina ducked beneath an awning of a closed cafe, shivering. Her phone battery was down to 6%. She opened her purse, an expensive one, though its inside told the truth: 3 coins, a broken compact mirror, and an eviction notice. The absurdity hit her, and she laughed, but it came out like a sob. She had spent years hosting luncheons for women she secretly envied, pretending to be unshakable. She had learned to speak the language of wealth, restraint, charm, small smiles. But now, in this rain, her carefully constructed grace washed away. A little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve nearby, pointing at Alina. "Mommy, why's the lady crying?" "I'm not," Alina whispered under her breath. "Not anymore." She wanted to scream, "I'm not one of those people. I belong somewhere else." But the truth was crueler: she didn't belong anywhere anymore. Her heels, cheap replacements for the designer ones she sold last week, slipped on the pavement. The suitcase toppled, spilling what remained of her life: a few clothes, a framed wedding photo that cracked as it hit the ground. She froze. Her reflection split across the broken glass, 2 versions of herself staring back. The woman she used to be, and the one left behind. Across the street, Ethan hesitated before crossing. He had seen that look too many times, the silent collapse that happens when pride meets rock bottom. He approached slowly, careful not to startle her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice calm, deep, but kind. She looked up, water tracing her cheekbones like liquid glass. "Do I look okay to you?" "Honestly," he said. "No." Her lips curved, half sarcastic, half grateful. "Then you're more honest than most people I've met this year." Ethan crouched beside her, helping gather the spilled clothes. She flinched when he picked up the broken frame. "Don't," she said quickly. "Leave it." He nodded, setting it gently aside anyway. "Rough night. Rough life," she muttered. "This is just the finale." He studied her face, tired eyes, trembling hands, defiance holding her together by threads. There was something familiar in that look. The quiet desperation of someone who had once had everything and now had to face herself without it. "I'm Ethan," he said simply. "I'm not looking for help," she replied. "I didn't offer any." That caught her off guard. "Then what do you want?" He met her gaze. "To ask a question." She frowned. "About what?" He hesitated, sensing the weight of the moment, the fragile line between compassion and intrusion. The rain softened around them, a strange hush settling as if the city itself were waiting. "If someone lost everything, money, family, comfort, what do you think would still define them? Would it be love, pride, faith, or something else? Share your thought in the comments." The rain had softened to a whisper now, a cold mist weaving silver threads between them. Ethan's eyes held hers steadily, not searching, not pitying, just seeing. It was disarming. Alina wasn't used to being looked at that way. Gregory had looked through her, the world had looked past her, but this man. He looked into her, and it made something in her chest twist painfully. "What's your question?" she asked, her voice thin, wrapped around exhaustion. He took a slow breath, the kind people take when they're about to cross a line they can't uncross. "If everything you had was gone, money, comfort, reputation, who would you be?" The words hit like thunder disguised as calm. For a moment, all Alina could do was blink, her mouth parting as though she might laugh. But there was no humor left in her. Only confusion. Only ache. "What kind of question is that?" she finally managed. "The kind most people never answer," Ethan said softly. She scoffed, dragging her wet hair from her face. "I'd be me, obviously." "Who's that?" The silence that followed felt heavy, dangerous. Alina's fingers tightened on her suitcase handle. "You don't know me. You have no idea who I am." "You're right," he said. "But I think maybe you don't either." Her jaw clenched. "You think you're clever, huh? Asking poetic questions to strangers in the rain." He didn't flinch. "No. I just think people deserve to hear the truth, even if it's uncomfortable." She stared at him, unsure if she wanted to slap him or thank him. "You don't know what I've been through." "I don't," he agreed quietly. "But I can tell you've been through enough to stop trusting kindness." That did it. The fragile composure she'd been holding cracked. "Kindness?" she snapped. "Do you know what kindness got me? A man who said he loved me while cheating with our lawyer's assistant. A marriage that ended with my name dragged through every gossip column. Kindness got me ruined." Her voice broke on the last word. She turned away, wiping at tears she swore she wouldn't shed. "So forgive me if I don't answer your philosophical nonsense tonight. I just want to survive until morning." Ethan didn't move closer. He respected the space between them but didn't retreat either. "Then maybe that's who you are right now, a survivor. And maybe that's enough." The simplicity of it stopped her mid-step. She turned, her face pale and wet, eyes flickering between fury and disbelief. "A survivor," she repeated, like the word itself was foreign. He nodded once. "Surviving doesn't make you weak. It makes you alive. And that's the start of everything else." She stared at him for a long time, as if trying to read the meaning behind his calm expression. His coat was soaked, his hair dripping onto his collar. Yet he stood there as though the weather had no power over him. There was something steady about him, something she both envied and feared. "Why are you even talking to me?" she asked, quieter now. "Because you looked like you needed someone to remind you that being lost doesn't mean being worthless." The words caught her off guard again. Something warm tried to break through her bitterness, but she buried it fast. "You really think a sentence like that can fix a life?" "No," he said. "But sometimes it's enough to start one." She looked away, blinking fast. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, distorted like her reflection. Too many pieces to make sense of. Have you ever been asked a question that stopped you in your tracks, one that forced you to face who you truly are? Tell me in the comments. What question changed your perspective once? "Look," Alina said finally, exhaling hard. "I don't need your sympathy. I just need a place to figure things out." "There's a shelter 2 blocks down," Ethan said gently. "They take walk-ins, no questions asked." "No questions," she echoed bitterly. "Must be nice." His lips curved faintly. "You'd be surprised how many questions they never ask." She lifted her suitcase again, her fingers trembling from cold and exhaustion. "Thanks for your, whatever this was, conversation," he said. "Right." Her voice wavered. "Well, enjoy your night of saving strangers." She turned to leave, but he called after her softly. "You never answered." She paused, half in shadow. "Answered what?" "My question." Alina looked over her shoulder, the rain blurring her lashes, her voice quieter now, defensive, but tinged with pain. "Maybe I don't know the answer yet." "Then maybe that's where you start," Ethan replied. The simplicity of his tone, no judgment, no pity, unraveled her faster than anger ever could. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him that she had known who she was, once. Mrs. Gregory Pierce. Philanthropist. Socialite. Wife. But now, all she could think was, who am I without all of that? When Alina reached the shelter that night, she found the lights dim, the air thick with coffee and disinfectant. The woman at the counter gave her a blanket and pointed to a cot. No one asked her name. No one cared where she'd come from. For the first time in years, she was nobody, and somehow that both terrified and freed her. She lay awake long after the lights went out, hearing the city hum through cracked windows. And somewhere in the rain-soaked silence of her thoughts, Ethan's question kept echoing. If everything you had was gone, who would you be? She turned that question over and over, searching for an answer that didn't hurt. By dawn, she still hadn't found one. But something had shifted. The next morning, when she left the shelter, the world felt both cruel and new. She didn't notice Ethan watching from across the street, coffee in hand, eyes following her until she disappeared around the corner. He wasn't sure why he cared. But the look in her eyes had stayed with him all night, the mixture of defiance and despair. He had asked hundreds of people hundreds of questions, but hers had answered something inside him. The city stirred awake around them, cars honking, street vendors opening, life continuing indifferently. But for Alina Pierce and Ethan Cole, something had already changed. Neither knew it yet, but the question that began in the rain would soon entangle their fates in ways neither could predict. The rain was gone the next morning, but it had left the city washed in gray. Alina stood outside the shelter's exit door, clutching her suitcase and blinking into the chill wind. The world felt both enormous and empty, too big for someone with nowhere to go. She told herself she wasn't broken, only between versions. The problem was, she had no idea what the next version looked like. She spent the next few days searching for work, anything respectable that didn't scream pity hire. She'd walked into restaurants, hotels, boutiques. Each time, she'd felt the same shift in the air the moment she filled out an application. They saw the expensive name, the perfect handwriting, the Pierce on her ID, and the polite smiles tightened. Overqualified. We'll keep your resume on file. Isn't this kind of different from your usual field? Different, as if starting over was a crime. By the 5th day, Her shoes were soaked from walking, her stomach tight from skipped meals, and her pride so raw she could barely meet her own reflection in store windows. Still, she refused to go back. Not to Gregory. Not to the world that had watched her fall. That stranger's question, Ethan's, had started something she didn't want to feel. If everything you had was gone, who would you be? She hated that it haunted her, but it did. Every night, she tried to shove it away like a song stuck on repeat. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Ethan sat in his office, if you could call it that. The space above Haven Street Outreach wasn't luxurious. Brick walls, old wood, and a view of the city skyline framed by fog. He preferred it that way. It reminded him that wealth meant nothing without purpose. He should have been reviewing proposals for a new housing initiative. Instead, his mind kept drifting to the woman in the rain. Alina, he'd learned later, after quietly checking the shelter's intake log. He told himself it wasn't intrusion, just concern. But the truth was more complicated. There was something about her, the way her anger masked grief, the way she carried humiliation with grace she didn't know she had. He'd seen hundreds of people broken by life, but very few who refused to crumble completely. Still, he knew better than to chase ghosts. Ethan had once tried to save someone who didn't want saving, his younger sister, Maya. He'd failed then. The memory still stung. So when he found himself replaying Alina's voice in his head, he leaned back, exhaling sharply. Don't get involved, Cole. Not again. But fate, as it often did, wasn't done yet. 3 days later, Alina finally landed a job at a small downtown cafe. The owner, Mrs. Diaz, hired her without judgment, without prying questions. You ever made coffee before? She'd asked. No, Alina admitted. You'll learn. Everyone does. There was kindness in her eyes, not pity, but genuine human warmth. It disarmed Alina, made her throat ache. She started the next morning. Her first shift was chaos, burnt milk, spilled cups, impatient customers. Her hands shook as she tried to count change, her mind still wired for ballrooms and boardrooms. By noon, she wanted to quit. But something in her refused. She needed to prove she could survive without anyone's name beside hers. By the 3rd week, she'd learned the rhythm of the espresso machine, the scent of roasted beans, the rough feel of worn bills in her palm. For the first time in years, her days had structure, not glamorous, but honest. And yet, she couldn't shake the stranger's voice. Sometimes, between customers, she'd look out the cafe window and imagine seeing him again. His calm eyes. That question. The one she still couldn't answer. Then she'd catch herself and force a laugh. Get a grip, Alina. You don't even know him. One afternoon, Mrs. Diaz handed her a flyer. We're helping with the city charity gala next month. They need volunteers to set up tables, serve guests, low pay, long hours. You in? Alina hesitated. The word gala made her stomach twist. That world had chewed her up and spit her out. But she needed the money. Sure, she said finally. Count me in. She didn't know that the gala was being organized by Haven Street Foundation, Ethan's foundation. Fate, it seemed, had a sense of irony. Sometimes life circles us back to what we've been running from. People, places, lessons. Do you believe in second chances? Or do you think life only moves forward? Tell me your view in the comments. A week later, Alina was wiping down the cafe counter when she saw it. A familiar tall figure outside, passing by with his coat collar turned up against the cold. Her chest tightened instantly. Ethan. He didn't see her. He was talking to someone, a volunteer maybe, carrying a clipboard. But that walk, that quiet composure. It was him. She froze, heart pounding, watching through the glass until he disappeared down the block. Are you okay? Mrs. Diaz asked. Yeah, Alina said quickly. Just thought I saw someone I used to know. Old friend. Something like that. Her voice caught on the word used. That night, she dreamed of the rain again, of his question echoing through the storm. When she woke up, She whispered the answer into the dark, just to test how it felt. Who would I be? She exhaled. Someone, still standing. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Across town, Ethan finished a late meeting with his outreach staff. His assistant, Clara, handed him a list of new volunteers for the gala event. He skimmed it absent-mindedly, then froze when he reached the last name, Alina Pierce. For a moment, he didn't breathe. The rain outside the windows started again, faint but steady, just like the night they'd met. Clara noticed his pause. Something wrong. No, he said after a beat. Nothing wrong at all. But inside, his heart had already begun to race. The city seemed smaller suddenly, as if the universe was quietly folding their stories back toward each other. Neither Alina nor Ethan knew what awaited them at that gala, but both could feel it, that slow, magnetic pull of unfinished fate. The night of the charity gala came faster than Alina expected. The city shimmered under 1,000 lights, polished cars sliding down glassy streets. She hadn't worn heels in months, but the old muscle memory returned as she balanced on borrowed shoes and adjusted her volunteer badge. Set-up crew. The venue, an old opera house repurposed for events, buzzed with staff, decorators, and catering teams. Every chandelier seemed to mock her. She'd once attended events like this as a guest, not as the person carrying trays. Keep your head down. Do your work. Leave when it's done, she reminded herself. Pierce. A coordinator called. You're on logistics. You'll be assisting the director tonight. Director. Alina echoed. Yeah, Mr. Ethan Cole. You'll report to him directly. The clipboard almost slipped from her hands. No, not him. Her pulse kicked hard in her throat. The universe, it seemed, was done being subtle. Ethan was already there when she entered the main hall. Dark suit. No tie. The same quiet composure that had unnerved her before. He was discussing stage placements with a lighting crew when his gaze flicked up and found her. For a fraction of a second, the room stilled. Alina froze, caught between pride and panic. Ethan's expression shifted, first surprise, then something softer. Recognition. Relief. Maybe even gratitude. He crossed the room slowly, as if giving her a chance to bolt. I thought you said you weren't staying in the city, he said quietly when he reached her. Her lips twitched. And I thought you didn't check on people's records. He chuckled once, low, almost apologetic. You remember my question? How could I forget? It haunted me for weeks. Her tone was light, but her eyes betrayed the truth. He studied her face for a moment, as if measuring the distance between who she'd been and who she was now. You look different, he said finally. I scrub tables for a living, she replied dryly. Kind of hard to look the same after that. There was a beat of silence, charged and unspoken. Ethan gestured toward the ballroom floor. Come on. We have tables to set. They worked side by side, quietly at first. The air between them was thick with half-buried thoughts. He'd roll up his sleeves. She'd avoid looking at the strength in his forearms. She'd brush past him, their shoulders nearly touching, and feel her chest tighten without permission. Every now and then, he'd ask a simple question, about the layout or supplies, and she'd respond curtly, trying to sound unaffected. By the time the first wave of guests arrived, the hall glowed with soft gold light. Strings played. Laughter swelled. Perfume mingled with champagne. Alina lingered near the side doors, watching the glittering crowd. A strange ache pressed behind her ribs. These were her people once. Now she was invisible to them. Ethan approached, hands in pockets. You okay? Fine, she said quickly. He followed her gaze. You used to belong here. I used to pretend I did, she murmured. He tilted his head. You don't pretend now. No, she said. Now I just survive. That honesty startled even her. She hadn't planned to say it. But something about Ethan made it too easy to stop performing. You're stronger than you think, Alina, he said softly. She shook her head. Don't start with the motivational speeches. Who said it's a speech? He smiled faintly. Maybe it's just the truth. Her throat tightened. She turned away before he could see. Hours passed. The event moved smoothly, at least until the final presentation, when the projection equipment malfunctioned. The crowd murmured. The event coordinator panicked. Ethan stayed calm. Backup system, he ordered, moving toward the control table. Pierce, help me reroute power to the secondary port. She blinked. You think I know how? You're quick. You'll figure it out. Against her better judgment, she followed. They crouched beside the stage, tangled wires and flashing lights surrounding them. Their hands brushed once, an electric touch neither acknowledged but both felt. Hold that, Ethan said, leaning close. His scent, clean, warm, faintly cedar, hit her like memory. Her pulse raced. When the projector blinked back to life, the audience applauded. Ethan glanced at her, breathless, smiling. Told you. She couldn't help it, she smiled back. Later, when the guests began to leave, Mrs. Diaz, volunteering on the catering side, winked at Alina. Looks like you made a new friend. Alina flushed. He's my boss tonight. Mrs. Diaz teased. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, I'll be back making lattes. But even as she said it, her heart didn't fully believe it. As the cleanup crew packed up, Ethan walked her out. The rain had started again, gentle this time, like déjà vu. They stood beneath the awning, the city reflected in puddles at their feet. You didn't have to stay this long, he said. Didn't have anywhere else to be. Ethan hesitated. Do you ever think about starting over properly? Not just surviving, actually living again. She frowned. That's easy for you to say. Maybe, he said. But I've been where you are. Lost. Angry. Ashamed of things I couldn't fix. Her eyes flickered up. You look like you've had your life together since birth. He laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. You'd be surprised. The rain deepened, tapping softly on the awning above them. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Ethan said, if you ever want to talk or figure things out, come by the Haven office. We run workshops, skills, mentorships. It's not charity. I didn't say it was. I know, he said. But I wanted you to hear it that way. He took a step back, hands in his pockets, rain streaking his hair. Good night, Alina. She watched him go until he disappeared around the corner, his silhouette dissolving into the city haze. Then she turned toward the bus stop, heart unsteady. That night, lying in her small rented room above the cafe, Alina stared at the ceiling. She should have felt content. The gala had gone well, her boss had been kind, she'd even earned a little extra money. But instead, her mind kept circling back to Ethan's eyes, his quiet conviction, his question. Who would you be? He'd asked that night in the rain. And tonight, he'd given her the beginning of an answer. Someone who could still build something from nothing. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. Sometimes, the people who re-enter our lives aren't there to rescue us. They're there to remind us who we were before we forgot. Has anyone ever reappeared in your life at just the right moment? Tell me your story in the comments. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of Alina's life began to shift. Mornings still started with the hiss of the espresso machine, the faint aroma of roasted beans clinging to her hair. But in the afternoons, she found herself walking toward the Haven Community Center, the place Ethan had mentioned that night outside the gala. The first time she stepped through its glass doors, she hesitated. The space was bright and unassuming. A cluster of volunteers chatted near a corkboard of job postings. Laughter spilled from a nearby workshop where someone was teaching a small group how to write resumes. Ethan wasn't there that day, but his presence was everywhere. The staff spoke of him with quiet respect, and his name carried warmth, not authority. By her third visit, she'd enrolled in a digital marketing class. By her fifth, She was helping to coordinate donations for displaced women. It was strange, feeling useful again. But stranger still was what Ethan's words had done to her, unraveling the numbness she'd built like armor. He appeared again one afternoon while she was arranging boxes of supplies. "You're becoming the backbone of this place," he said, leaning against the doorframe. She looked up, smiling despite herself. "Don't exaggerate." "I don't," he said simply. "You've done more in 3 weeks than some people do in a year." She felt her cheeks warm. "You're just saying that because I actually label things." Ethan chuckled, then nodded toward the table. "Lunch? My treat." They ate at a small diner across the street, the kind that smelled like old Greece and nostalgia. It wasn't a date. Not really. But the air between them had changed, charged, cautious, curious. "You said once that you'd lost everything," Ethan began gently, stirring his coffee. "What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" She hesitated, her hand tightening around the edge of her cup. "You really want to know?" "I wouldn't ask if I didn't." Alina looked down. The words came slowly, scraped raw by memory. "I met Nathan when I was 24. He was already successful, arrogant, magnetic, the kind of man who fills a room and makes you believe he owns it. I thought he was my forever. Turns out, he was just renting me for the good years." Ethan didn't interrupt. His eyes never left her face. "When he divorced me," she continued, "he made sure I walked away with nothing. Every account, every property, even the car. I signed away everything because he said fighting back would only humiliate me further. And I was too broken to argue." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I thought love meant sacrifice," she whispered. "But with him, it meant disappearance." Silence stretched between them, heavy but not empty. Ethan's gaze softened. "You didn't disappear," he said quietly. "You survived." "Barely," she murmured. He leaned forward, voice low. "Barely still counts. It means you're still here to start again." Alina looked at him then, really looked, at the faint scar near his jawline, the way his fingers curled protectively around his mug. There was a gravity to him she hadn't noticed before, a shadow under his steadiness. "What about you?" she asked suddenly. "You talk like someone who's been burned too." Ethan gave a small, rueful smile. "Fair enough." He exhaled, eyes turning distant. "I built my first company at 26. Lost it at 28. Not to bad business but betrayal. My best friend, my partner, sold me out. Took everything. My reputation, my savings, even my name in some circles. I went from being the golden boy of Silicon Valley to the headline scandal." Her eyes widened. "You." He nodded. "Took years to climb out. When I did, I promised myself 2 things. I'd never let greed define me again, and I'd help people who'd lost their footing find it again. That's how Haven started." Alina sat back, her breath shaky. "So that's what you do, save broken people?" "No," he said softly, his gaze locking on hers. "I remind them they were never broken to begin with." For a moment, they simply looked at each other. 2 survivors sharing the fragile peace of mutual understanding. As they walked back to the center, the sky bruised purple with oncoming rain. Ethan stopped by the doorway and turned to her. "You know, Alina, when I met you that night in the rain, I thought you were angry at me." "I was," she admitted, smiling faintly. "You caught me on the worst night of my life." "And yet," he said, "here you are, turning it into something better." She tilted her head. "You think people can really start over? Like completely?" "I don't just think it," he said quietly. "I've seen it." A car honked nearby, pulling them back to the present. Alina looked away, fighting the warmth rising in her chest. "Thank you," she murmured, "for not treating me like a charity case." He smiled. "You're the last person I'd pity." That evening, Alina sat by the window of her small apartment, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass. Her heart felt unsettled. Not heavy, not light, something in between. She picked up the small notebook she'd begun keeping, notes from her classes, goals, fragments of thought. On one page, she'd scribbled a question Ethan once asked: "If you weren't afraid, who would you be?" She stared at it, then wrote beneath it slowly: "Someone brave enough to love again." The realization startled her. She dropped the pen, her breath uneven. Love again. She wasn't ready for that. Not after everything. And certainly not with a man like Ethan Cole, steady, kind, dangerous in the way hope was dangerous. But the truth was undeniable. He was becoming the first person she'd trusted in years. And that terrified her more than losing everything ever had. 2 nights later, while closing up the cafe, she received an unexpected visitor. The doorbell chimed, and there he was, her past dressed in a designer suit. Nathan. Her breath hitched. "Alina," he said smoothly, eyes scanning her uniform. "I had to see it for myself." "What are you doing here?" she whispered, fingers curling around the counter. "Just checking on my ex-wife. Word around town is you've become some kind of charity project." "Leave." He smirked. "You look good, considering. Guess some people like playing poor." Her nails bit into her palms. "You should go before I forget the years I wasted keeping your secrets." His eyes narrowed, the smirk vanishing. "Careful, Alina. You wouldn't want to ruin that little redemption image you've got going." She met his gaze, steady this time. "No, Nathan. I'd ruin you first." For the first time, she saw it, the flicker of uncertainty behind his confidence. He stepped back, lips tightening. "We'll see." When he left, the silence he left behind was heavier than the storm outside. But she wasn't the same woman he'd broken. She was stronger now, and she wasn't alone. Later that night, she texted Ethan for the first time. "Hey, you were right. Some ghosts really do show up when you least expect them." His reply came quickly. "Then it's time you stop running from them. Tomorrow, come to Haven early. We'll talk." Alina exhaled, heart pounding. The storm outside raged, but for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of it. She was ready to face what came next. Sometimes, healing begins not when we escape our past, but when we finally face it without fear. What would you say if your past suddenly stood in front of you today? The next morning, the city was drenched in gold light after a long night of rain. Alina woke before dawn, her heart strangely light despite the heaviness of the previous evening. She replayed Nathan's sneer in her mind, but this time, it didn't sting the way it once would have. Maybe it was because of Ethan's text. Maybe it was because for the first time, someone believed she wasn't broken beyond repair. By 8, she was at Haven. Ethan was waiting outside the small conference room, 2 coffees in hand. "Morning," he said, offering one with a smile. "You look like you didn't sleep." "Didn't," she admitted, taking the cup. "Had a visitor. Nathan." She blinked, surprised. "How did you?" "Your tone in the text," he said simply. "You sounded like someone who'd just seen a ghost." Alina exhaled. "You're not wrong. Want to tell me what happened?" They stepped inside the quiet room. Morning sunlight spilled through tall windows, painting the walls with soft warmth. She told him everything, Nathan's appearance, his words, his threat. Ethan didn't interrupt once. He listened, steady and present, his silence a kind of safety. When she finished, he said, "You handled it better than most people would." "I almost hit him," she confessed with a short laugh. "Does that count as handling it?" He smiled. "Considering what he did to you, that's restraint." Something in his tone, half admiration, half protectiveness, melted a piece of her she hadn't realized was still frozen. "Ethan," she began softly, "you ever think some people don't heal? That maybe some cracks just stay there forever?" He thought for a moment before answering. "I think the cracks are proof that the light got in." She looked at him, eyes burning. You really believe that? I have to, he said simply. It's the only way I've survived too. They spent the morning working side by side on a new Haven project, a program to help women rebuild their careers after loss or divorce. Alina offered ideas, and Ethan took notes, genuinely listening. See, he said when she finished explaining a mentorship plan. You're a natural leader. She rolled her eyes. I'm just talking. No, he said. You're designing a future. You just don't realize it yet. The words hit deeper than he knew. For years, she'd felt like her story had ended the day Nathan left. But standing there with Ethan, surrounded by whiteboards and coffee cups, she felt something dangerous. Hope. When she looked at him, she saw not the billionaire she'd met in the rain, but the man who made her believe she still had purpose. Later, he walked her out to the courtyard garden behind the center, a hidden space of wildflowers and benches. I come here when things get too loud, he said. It reminds me why I started this place. She smiled, brushing her hand over the petals of a yellow daisy. It's beautiful. He nodded. So are second chances. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, neither of them looked away. Something unspoken pulsed between them, not quite love, not yet, but its echo. Then Ethan cleared his throat. I'm hosting a small fundraiser Friday night. Nothing fancy. Just a dinner for the volunteers and donors. You should come. Me? She laughed. I'm not exactly donor material. Maybe not, he said, but you're part of Haven, and that's what matters. She hesitated. You'll be there. Wouldn't dream of missing it. The fundraiser was held at a cozy rooftop garden cafe. Strings of warm lights hung overhead, and laughter floated through the air. Alina wore a simple navy dress she'd borrowed from Mrs. Diaz, elegant enough to make her feel like herself again, yet humble enough to remind her how far she'd come. Ethan saw her the moment she stepped in. His eyes softened, and something unreadable passed across his face. Admiration, maybe even awe. You clean up well, he said quietly when she joined him by the balcony. I could say the same, she replied, smiling shyly. They spent the evening talking, laughing, sharing glances that lingered too long. When the music slowed, Ethan extended his hand. Dance with me. I don't, she began, but he was already leading her gently onto the floor. The world around them blurred. The city lights shimmered, distant and forgiving. Her head rested against his shoulder, and for the first time in years, Alina felt peace. Not the fragile kind that shatters at the first hint of pain, but the deep, still kind that feels like home. You know what's funny? She murmured. For the first time, I don't feel like someone's ex-wife. I just feel me. He smiled against her hair. Then that's exactly who you should keep being. After the dance, they stepped out onto the terrace. The night was cool, the stars faint but clear. Alina leaned against the railing. I keep waiting for it to all fall apart again. It won't, Ethan said softly. You don't know that. He turned toward her, eyes steady. You're right. But I know this, you're not who you were when he left. You're stronger, wiser. And you have a choice now, to keep rebuilding, or to keep reliving. She met his gaze, heart pounding. You make it sound easy. It's not, he said, stepping closer. But it's worth it. There was something in his eyes that made her breath catch, a question neither dared to ask aloud. Then, instead of words, Ethan reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed her cheek, soft, tentative. Alina didn't move away. For a brief, shimmering second, the world went quiet. Just the rhythm of her pulse, the warmth of his touch, the fragile promise that maybe love could bloom from the ruins. Then he drew his hand back, slowly. We should get back. She nodded, though her heart screamed stay. That night, lying in bed, Alina couldn't sleep. Her mind kept replaying that touch, that look, that quiet certainty in Ethan's voice. For the first time since her divorce, she didn't feel like she was trying to survive. She felt like she was beginning to live. She picked up her notebook again and wrote one sentence beneath the last entry. Sometimes, love doesn't save you. It simply finds you when you're finally ready to be found. Sometimes the people meant to heal us don't arrive with grand gestures, they come softly, like sunlight after rain. Do you believe love can grow out of friendship and shared pain? Tell me your thoughts below. The morning after the fundraiser felt like sunlight after a storm. Alina woke up with a quiet smile, still replaying Ethan's laughter, his warmth, the way he'd looked at her as though she wasn't a broken thing but something worth finding again. She walked into the cafe humming, unaware that the world outside was already shifting against her. By noon, she noticed the stares. 2 regular customers whispered behind their cups, their phones glowing with something she couldn't see. Then one of the baristas, Mia, rushed in from the backroom, eyes wide. Alina, you need to see this. Mia held up her phone. The headline made Alina's stomach drop. Haven founder Ethan Cole caught in affair with divorced beneficiary. Sources claim he funds his lovers. Below it, a photo, grainy but unmistakable, of Ethan and Alina on the rooftop terrace, her hand brushing his, city lights glimmering around them. Her breath caught. No. It's everywhere, Mia whispered. They're saying he's been using Haven for publicity. That you're, part of it. The words blurred. Her vision tunneled. Her chest felt like it was collapsing inward. She fumbled for her phone. A dozen messages. 2 from Ethan. 1 from Mrs. Diaz. 1 from a number she hadn't seen in months. Nathan. She didn't need to open it to know who had done this. Ethan called again. She answered this time. Alina. His voice came fast, urgent. Don't believe anything you're seeing. It's a smear campaign, Nathan's behind it. Her voice shook. How can you be sure? I recognized the journalist. He's been on Nathan's payroll before. I'm handling it. Handling it? She snapped, voice cracking. Ethan, they're calling me a fraud. The cafe owner just asked if I'm the mistress of Haven. Do you know how humiliating that is? Alina, please, listen to me. But she couldn't. Her throat burned. Every fear she'd buried came rushing back, the whispers during her divorce, the pitying looks, the humiliation that never really left her. She hung up before he could finish. By afternoon, reporters were waiting outside the cafe. Cameras flashed. Alina Pierce, care to comment on your relationship with Ethan Cole? Are the Haven scholarships fake? Were you paid to play victim? She shoved past them, tears stinging her eyes, and fled down the street. Ethan found her that evening at the garden behind the community center, her sanctuary. She sat on the bench, arms around herself, eyes red. He approached slowly. I told you I'd fix this. You can't fix it, she said bitterly. You're the story now. We're the scandal. I'll hold a press conference. I'll tell them the truth. And what is the truth, Ethan? Her voice broke. That I was a desperate woman who fell for the one man kind enough to look at her? He flinched. You don't believe that. I don't know what to believe, she cried. You told me Haven wasn't about charity, but now everyone thinks that's all I am. A charity case. Your charity case. Alina. No, she whispered, shaking her head. This is exactly what Nathan said would happen. He warned me. He told me people like you don't really save, they just collect broken things to make themselves feel whole. Ethan's face went still. Is that what you think I've been doing? She couldn't answer. Her silence was enough. He stepped back, pain flickering across his features. I thought you knew me better than that. I thought I did too, she whispered. For a long time, neither spoke. The wind stirred the flowers. Distant thunder rolled over the city. Finally, Ethan said quietly, when the world turned on me, I stopped trusting anyone. I promised myself I'd never get close again. You made me break that promise. Her breath hitched. Ethan. But maybe Nathan's right, he said, voice low. Maybe I still don't know how to care without trying to fix. Maybe I still use people to prove I'm not the villain they made me. Don't, she whispered. Don't do that to yourself. He smiled faintly, sad, hollow. It's already done. He turned, hands in his pockets, shoulders heavy. Take care of yourself, Alina. She stood as he walked away, rain beginning to fall, drops cold against her skin. Ethan, please. But he didn't look back. That night, the headlines grew worse. Sponsors began withdrawing from Haven. Anonymous comments flooded social media, calling her names she thought she'd buried forever. Mrs. Diaz came by to comfort her, but Alina barely spoke. She stared at the window, the rain streaking down like her own reflection dissolving. In the silence, a terrible thought formed. Maybe Nathan was right. Maybe I was never meant for love like this. She picked up her notebook, the one that had become her anchor, and flipped through the pages. Her words looked foolish now. Hopeful. Naive. If you weren't afraid, who would you be? She stared at the question until her tears blurred it. I don't know anymore, she whispered. Days passed in a fog. Ethan resigned temporarily from Haven to protect the organization. The media called it an admission of guilt. Alina quit the cafe after the owner suggested a quiet break. Everywhere she went, whispers followed. By the end of the week, she packed her few belongings into a single duffel bag. The city had turned cold again. She left her apartment key on the counter and walked to the bus station. As she waited for the next departure, her phone buzzed, a new message. She almost didn't look, but something in her gut told her to. It was from Ethan. I know I can't fix this. Not anymore. But you need to know the truth. I didn't come into your life to save you. You came into mine to remind me what saving actually meant. I'm sorry I let the world convince you otherwise. She clutched the phone, tears streaming silently. She typed a reply. Deleted it. Tried again. Deleted that too. Then the bus doors opened, and she stepped inside without sending anything. As the bus pulled away, city lights fading behind her, she looked down at the notebook in her lap. On the last page, she wrote, Maybe love isn't what you find. Maybe it's what you choose to keep believing in, even when it's gone. Sometimes, love breaks not because it ends, but because it's real enough to expose everything we're still afraid of. Have you ever walked away from someone you still loved, just because it hurt too much to stay? Share your thoughts below. The bus carried Alina miles away from the city lights, away from the noise, away from the ruin of her reputation, away from him. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to breathe somewhere no one knew her name. She got off in a small coastal town 3 hours south. The air smelled like salt and pine. She rented a tiny attic room above a bookshop run by an old woman named Margaret, who didn't ask questions, just handed her a key and said, It's quiet here. You'll heal better in silence. For the first time in months, Alina didn't wake to her phone buzzing. No headlines. No messages. Just the whisper of waves against the shore. But silence wasn't peace. It was space, the kind that makes every memory echo louder. She tried to write. At first, her pen refused to move. Every time she started a sentence, she saw Ethan's eyes, the way they'd gone still when she said she didn't know what to believe. After a few days, she stopped trying to write about him. Instead, she wrote about herself. She wrote about the girl who'd scrubbed marble floors in a house that was never hers. The woman who'd loved a man who saw her only when she was already gone. The stranger who'd walked away from the one person who looked at her and didn't see damage. Slowly, the pages filled. Slowly, she began to breathe again. Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan was unraveling in his own way. He'd resigned from Haven, yes, but the damage went deeper than headlines. Investors had pulled out, questioning his integrity. The board had pressured him to step aside indefinitely. For the first time in years, he wasn't building anything. He was just existing. And in that emptiness, he saw all the things he'd avoided, his fear of being seen, his need to control, his belief that love was something earned through perfection. He reread Alina's letter, the one she'd written him months ago when she'd first joined Haven as a volunteer. It said, "You taught me that sometimes the only way to start again is to believe someone still sees you as more than what you've lost." He realized he'd never really let her see him. He'd only ever shown her the version of himself that didn't bleed. One evening, Ethan went back to the old community garden, the one Alina had helped rebuild. He walked through the rows of marigolds and jasmine she'd planted, now blooming wild and untamed. He sat on the same bench where she'd once told him about losing everything. And there, under the dim orange glow of the street lamp, he made his decision. He would stop trying to control the story. He would start telling the truth, not to the media, not to the board, but to her. 2 days later, a letter arrived at the bookshop. Margaret found Alina on the porch, reading by the sea. "Someone tracked you down," she said, handing her a white envelope. There was no name on the front. Only the faint, familiar handwriting she'd know anywhere. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "Alina, I told you once that you reminded me what saving meant. That was only half the truth. You reminded me what being human meant. I spent my life trying to build things that would last. Businesses, legacies, structures. But when it came to people, I only knew how to hold them at arm's length. I mistook control for care. You were the first person who didn't need saving, just understanding. And I failed you because I didn't understand that love isn't rescue. It's respect. I won't ask you to come back. I only want you to know that I'm not hiding anymore. I've told the world the truth, all of it. That Haven is yours as much as mine. That every project with your name on it stays that way. That I believe in you, no matter who else doesn't. If you ever find it in your heart to forgive me, you'll know where to find me. Ethan." She read it twice. Then a third time. And by the end, the tears came, not from pain, but from something gentler, something like recognition. For the first time in months, she smiled. The next morning, she went to the bookshop's backroom and asked Margaret if she could borrow her old typewriter. "Thinking of writing again?" the older woman asked. "Yes," Alina said quietly. "But not just for me." That day, she began writing a short book, a memoir about loss, resilience, and the question that had started it all. If you weren't afraid, who would you be? She didn't know if Ethan would ever read it. But writing it felt like reclaiming her own name again. Weeks later, a news alert buzzed through the town. Haven had released an official statement. Ethan Cole's resignation had been reversed. He was reinstated after a full investigation cleared his name. But the real headline was smaller. Anonymous founder credits former employee's courage for Haven's renewal. She knew it was him. And that night, as the ocean wind whipped through her hair, she whispered into the dark, "Thank you." Across the city, Ethan stood on the same rooftop where their scandal had begun. The skyline glittered below him, clean and distant. He looked down at his phone, at the photo of the cafe where she used to work, now shuttered. Then, at a new message from his assistant. "The board approved your proposal for the Alina project." He smiled faintly. Sometimes, love wasn't a reunion. Sometimes, it was redemption spelled quietly through action. But destiny wasn't done with them yet. A month later, at a charity book fair in the city, a small new title appeared on a side table. "If You Weren't Afraid," by AP. The author wasn't there, but her words were. And when Ethan walked past that table, stopped, and read the first line, his heart nearly stopped. This isn't a story about being left with nothing. It's about discovering that sometimes, nothing is where everything begins. He closed the book, eyes glistening, and whispered, "Found you." When forgiveness finally comes, it's rarely loud. It's a whisper that says, "I understand now." Have you ever had to forgive someone without expecting anything back? How did it change you? The city smelled like rain again. It was the same scent as that morning months ago when everything had fallen apart, the day Alina lost her home, her marriage, and her name. Only now, the air didn't taste like endings. It tasted like beginning again. Her book had quietly taken off. If You Weren't Afraid had found its way to thousands of readers who saw themselves in her story. People who'd lost everything but still dared to ask the stranger's question that once saved her life. Every review spoke of hope, of courage, of someone who refused to stay broken. And now, she'd been invited to speak at a fundraising event hosted by the Alina Project, a name she hadn't expected to hear again. When she saw the invitation, she almost didn't go. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face him, to see what time and truth had done to the man who once defined her pain. But then she thought about her younger self, the one who'd once said, "If you weren't afraid, who would you be?" And she smiled. So she went. The ballroom was filled with light, soft gold and ivory, like dawn spilling through clouds. Dozens of faces turned toward her as she entered, but she didn't feel small anymore. She felt present. Then she saw him. Ethan stood across the room, tall, still, his expression unreadable but gentler than she remembered. There was no arrogance, no walls, just quiet awe, like a man seeing a miracle he never expected to get twice. Their eyes met. And for a moment, neither of them moved. It was Margaret, the old bookseller, who broke the silence beside her. "Go on, dear," she whispered. "You've already written the ending. Now go live it." Alina walked toward the podium, her heels clicking against marble, the same sound that once echoed through a mansion that no longer belonged to her. But this time, she wasn't walking towards someone else's power. She was walking into her own. She began to speak. "A year ago, I thought I'd lost everything. But what I really lost were the things that kept me from myself. Sometimes life strips us bare not to punish us, but to return us to the truth, that our worth was never in the person who left, or the wealth that vanished. It's in who we become when we have to start from nothing." Her voice trembled, not with fear but with feeling. The audience listened in silence. "Someone once asked me a question that changed my life. If you weren't afraid, who would you be? I didn't have an answer then. But now I do. I'd be this woman, standing here, alive, grateful, and unafraid to love again." The applause began softly, then grew, echoing through the hall. And when she stepped down, Ethan was waiting near the stage. He didn't rush forward. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, as if afraid that one wrong word could shatter this fragile piece. "You look different," he said finally, his voice low. "So do you," she replied. "Less polished. More real." He smiled faintly. "I stopped trying to fix everything I broke. Just started learning how to hold what's left." A pause. Then she said, "I read your press release. You didn't have to name the project after me." "I didn't," he said softly. "I named it after the version of you who believed in me before I did. You gave me that chance. This is me giving it back." She looked at him for a long time, the man who'd once ruined her, now standing before her with humility in his eyes and hope in his voice. "I don't know if I can go back to what we were," she whispered. "I'm not asking you to," he said. "I just want a chance to know who you've become. No lies, no saving, no conditions. Just two people, who finally see each other." Her throat tightened. "You really mean that?" "Yes. But if you walk away now, I'll still be grateful I ever got to love you." She took a step closer. The distance between them closed until she could feel his breath tremble. "I never stopped loving you," she said finally. "I just had to learn to love myself enough to forgive you." Ethan's eyes softened, breaking into tears he didn't bother to hide. "You have no idea how long I've waited to hear that." She smiled, a real, quiet smile. "Then stop waiting." He reached for her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. Later that night, after the gala ended, they walked through the city together. No limousines, no cameras, just two people tracing the outlines of their new beginning. The rain started again, soft and cool. He offered his jacket. She refused, laughing. "It's just water, Ethan. I can survive worse." "I know," he said, watching her spin under the rainlight, hair soaked, eyes bright. "That's what I love about you." She turned toward him. "You love me. I never stopped. And just like that, with no grand gesture, no audience, they kissed. Not like lovers desperate to rewrite the past, but like two souls finally ready to live in the present. Weeks later, Alina moved her writing workshops to the Alina Project. Women who had once been silenced now stood before her, sharing their own stories of loss and rebuilding. One of them asked her, "Miss Pierce, what made you start writing again?" She smiled. "A stranger's question. And the man who taught me that answers aren't found, they're built." Months passed. Their love didn't erase the scars, it honored them. Ethan still struggled to trust, Alina still wrestled with the fear of losing everything again. But they faced it together. They built something not of wealth or image, but of truth. Quiet dinners, laughter over burnt toast, shared mornings in the garden. Love, simple and unadorned. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Alina looked at Ethan and said softly, "Do you ever think about how it all began?" He smiled. "Every day. You walked into my life asking if I wasn't afraid, who would I be? And who are you now?" He looked at her, steady, sincere. "Yours." She leaned against him, eyes glistening as the city lights flickered on below. For the first time in forever, she didn't feel like she was starting over. She felt home. Have you ever lost everything, only to realize it was the start of finding yourself? Tell me below, what would you do differently if you weren't afraid anymore?
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.